Welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled, where we dissect the blueprints of the future, helping you navigate the most transformative changes happening right now.
Our mission today, as always on Tomorrow Unveiled, is to take this massive volume of research that's been provided to us, all the articles, the white papers, the commission reports, and really just extract a clear, cross-corroborated
All
consensus.
right.
We need to understand precisely how artificial intelligence is not just creating new tools, but, fundamentally redefining labor
And it's
markets.
so much more than that. It's challenging basic economic principles, and it's forcing some really urgent institutional and educational reform.
It is.
That's the core finding across all the source material, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we aren't here to marvel at new software.
No.
We're here because AI has earned this specific designation. It's a foundational general-purpose technology,
Yeah.
a GPT.
Exactly. And historically, things like steam power or electricity or the internal combustion engine, those were GPTs.
They don't just affect one industry.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They cut across and they stress every single sector at the same time. A GPT is like a shockwave. It diffuses across all sectors: finance, supply chain, healthcare, manufacturing, defense. And it blurs all those traditional boundaries we used to have between goods and services.
And because it's everywhere at once, it exposes all the weaknesses in the old architecture, the
Yeah.
systems that were designed for a simpler, less connected economy.
That's right.
Okay, so let's unpack that institutional stress. I want to talk about global trade, because
Mhm.
that was one of the densest and I think most critical areas that our dedicated research team highlighted.
Yes.
When a systemic technology like AI hits a body like, say, the World Trade Organization, the WTO, how do the existing rule books even hold up?
Well, they struggle
Yeah.
immensely because those rules were written for these very distinct kind of siloed concepts.
Right.
The WTO framework is organized around two major agreements, right? The General Agreement on Trade in Goods, which is KTT, and the General Agreement on Trade in Services, GETS.
And GATS, for instance, it operates using these sectoral schedules.
Exactly. It says, here are the rules for legal services, here are the rules for financial services, and so on.
Which made perfect sense when a bank was just a bank and a consulting firm was, well, just a consulting firm. But AI doesn't respect any of those boundaries.
Not at all. If a single generative AI platform provides functions that span legal contract review, financial risk analysis, and, say, translation services,
All at the same time.
all at the same time and often automatically, how do you apply commitments that were designed for these discrete service categories?
Yeah, can't.
The system it lacks the flexibility to categorize and regulate these multifunctional digital services effectively. The technology is modular, but the regulation is, it's stovepiped.
And that structural issue then spills into an even deeper legal problem, right? This fundamental complication of telling the difference between a human service and an AI service in a competitive sense.
The likeness analysis.
Yes, tell us about that.
The likeness analysis is absolutely crucial under trade law. It asks a simple question. Is the foreign product or service like the domestic product or service?
And if they are alike,
Then you generally have to treat them the same. So if an AI translation tool produces a document that is functional identical to one produced by a human translator, is that AI service considered like the human-provided service under the law?
so the core problem is that trade law was built on, what, physical similarities
Yeah.
or easily defined inputs?
But here the functional output is identical. It doesn't matter if the input was human labor or an algorithm.
And that's where all these most favored nation treatment claims get so complicated.
Right. So imagine a country decides, we have to protect our labor force, so they implement a human first rule.
Like, all financial advisory calls have to be handled by a certified human agent? Maybe AI can only be used for background research.
Exactly that kind of thing. So then, if a foreign country exports a fully automated, humanless AI advisory service that does the same thing for cheaper.
They could argue their product is being unfairly discriminated against.
Precisely. The foreign country can claim that the competitive output is functionally identical, and therefore the importing country is violating its WTO commitments.
Wow.
Trade rules were just not written with this kind of sophisticated cross-border labor substitution in mind, especially not when the end result could be mass job displacement.
And it seems like this whole organizing principle of technological neutrality, which I guess was intended to foster innovation,
It was.
it now actively stops governments from being able to distinguish between AI that substitutes for labor and AI that augments it.
That's the painful reality of it. And policymakers are realizing that just relying on domestic policy instruments, taxation, social safety nets, retraining programs, it's just not enough when these AI services are flowing across borders instantly.
And they're often bundled seamlessly with physical goods or other services. The job loss is, like, externalized.
It is.
So what's the consensus solution from the experts here? It sounds like trying to stop the technology is impossible, but, letting it decimate local labor is politically unstable.
Well, the policy experts argue very strongly that multilateral reform is needed. Not reform to deny that countries will use measures to protect their workers. That's just inevitable when these labor shocks happen.
Of course.
But to channel those responses through some kind of calibrated flexibility, we need mechanisms for things like a temporary suspension of commitments or maybe differentiated safeguard duties that account for the unique cross-border nature of this digital job displacement.
The current WTO framework, it was just built for a world where the physical location of the worker was what mattered most.
That's right. It simply needs a major structural update if it's going to maintain any relevance and, frankly, legitimacy in this new economic reality.
That sets the global stage, but let's pull back from the complexity of multilateral trade law and look at the immediate individual necessity, the digital skill imperative. Because the data compiled by our dedicated research team here it's not just strong, it's absolutely staggering.
It really creates this sense of universal urgency. The research team analyzed a massive data set. I think it was 43 million online job advertisements.
43 million.
Yeah. And the findings established, without a shadow of a doubt, that digital skills are just no longer optional add-ons.
So what was the headline figure?
92%. That's the consensus number.
92% of all job ads.
All of them. They require either what the team calls definitely digital or likely digital skills, which means if you lack basic digital competency, you are, for all intents and purposes, locked out of the modern job market right now.
Let's spend some time defining those two categories because that distinction is actually very instructive about how embedded technology is.
Right.
So when the research mentions definitely digital, what skills are they talking about?
Okay, so that category, which appeared in about 47% of job ads, means specialized identifiable software, hardware tools, or maybe programming language expertise.
So Python for data science, AutoCAD for engineering?
Exactly. Or specific experience with Salesforce or Oracle for enterprise management, even advanced visualization tools like Tableau. These are specific, measurable technology competencies.
Okay, and then you have the likely digital category, which covers the other 45% of the market. What does that look like on the ground?
This is interesting. It covers tasks that I guess you could theoretically do with paper and pencil.
Like bookkeeping or clerical support.
Right, or compiling a survey, setting up travel arrangements, tracking departmental budgets. But in reality, they're now almost exclusively accomplished using digital devices, cloud platforms, or common office software.
It's just the basic expectation that you can navigate a spreadsheet, manage digital files efficiently, use something like Slack or Teams.
It's the difference between being able to code Python and being able to manage a pivot table in Excel, but both are now mandatory for the vast majority of jobs.
And what's remarkable is the universal scope of this. This isn't just a tech sector thing.
Oh, not at all. The demand for digital skills is equally strong across every major industry, and that includes traditional sectors that you might assume are insulated, like manufacturing, construction, agriculture, wholesale trade.
And it's not just the big multinational corporations either, is it?
No, small businesses, which are the engine of job growth, they are seeking workers with foundational digital fluency just as much as the major corporations are.
Okay, that paints a picture of overwhelming demand. But let's look at the supply side, because this is where the crisis really emerges. What's the consensus finding on the skills gap in the existing workforce?
It's a pretty sobering fact. Nearly 1/3 of the U.S. workforce, we're talking tens of millions of people, lacks foundational digital skills.
A third.
Yeah. They cannot effectively navigate the digital tools required for 92% of the jobs available today. And this isn't just about being slow at typing, it's about being unable to participate in basic digital workflows.
That statistic is it's shocking, especially when you consider how disproportionately that deficit affects certain groups.
Exactly. The skill divide is reinforcing existing structural inequities. We see the highest rates of these foundational digital skill deficits among people of color, low-income individuals, aging workers, and those who face language or literacy barriers.
So if the pathway to economic mobility is now digital, and a third of the country is digitally excluded,
The consequences for long-term income inequality are, well, they're dire.
And there's a real economic penalty here, right? What does the data show about wages for jobs that require digital skills versus those that don't?
The difference is substantial. Jobs requiring even just one of those definitely digital skills paid an average median hourly wage of about $21.64.
All right.
Now, you contrast that with jobs requiring no digital skills whatsoever, which paid significantly less at $17.62 per hour.
So digital competency is not just a nice to have.
No, it's a required passport to the middle class.
So if we accept this reality, the urgency becomes palpable. The research team estimates that because of the speed of AI adoption, 50% of all employees will need some kind of significant reskilling by 2025.
50%.
That's a huge undertaking in such a compressed time frame.
And we're not talking about just, simple software updates. The research suggests two-thirds of the skills considered important today will change radically.
Two-thirds.
Yeah. When we looked at the priority list for required skills in 2015 and 2020, 7 out of the top 10 skills anticipated for 2025 were not on those prior lists.
So what are these new mandates? It sounds like we're moving beyond just rote technical competency.
We are. The top 2 skills for 2025 emphasize cognitive self-management above everything else.
And number one is?
Analytical thinking and innovation. That ranks number 1. This is the ability to spot patterns, to question assumptions, and to devise novel solutions using data.
Okay, and number 2?
Number 2 is active learning and learning strategies. This is the capacity for metacognition, the ability to identify your own skill gaps and then rapidly acquire new knowledge independently. The workforce needs to be perpetually adaptable.
So the idea is that AI takes care of the repetitive, codifiable tasks, which means the premium shifts to the human ability to learn, adapt, and think strategically about the information that the AI is generating.
That's the summary. And we see this demand played out in practical industry examples. You take modern manufacturing and the shift to Industry 4.0.
Right.
It's no longer about turning wrenches. Workers need expertise in collaborative robotics, predictive maintenance driven by data analysis, and using complex software like human-machine interface systems to monitor entire production lines.
And even the blue-collar sector is seeing this intense digital transformation. I mean, think about construction.
Absolutely.
Workers on a site now, they're using digital blueprints, building information modeling software on tablets. If they find an issue, like a conflict in the design,
They have to document it instantly, take a geotagged photo, and submit a formal request for information, an RFI, through a specific app.
that's a massive leap for frontline workers, right?
Right.
Many of whom built their careers on manual expertise, not digital document management.
It really is. The shift requires basic literacy in new platforms, connectivity management, device fluency. It highlights that the digital divide is fundamentally an equity issue because these are often the workers least likely to have access to high-quality, relevant training.
This level of systemic change must demand equally systemic policy intervention. What are governments doing to address this gap?
Well, there's a noticeable uptick in investment. In the U.S., our research highlights the commitment from the Department of Education. They're dedicating $50 million specifically for projects that use AI to enhance learning and student success.
So using AI as a tutor,
A
basically.
tutor, a personalized learning assistant, yeah. And there's another $50 million designated for high-quality short-term programs that lead to recognized stackable credentials
That signals a move away from those long, expensive academic pathways.
towards rapid, targeted upskilling, yes.
And the global picture seems even more radical. You mentioned countries launching comprehensive national curricula.
That's right. Countries that are explicitly trying to lead in the AI space, they aren't waiting. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, for example, have launched national government-led AI curriculum initiatives that span K-12 education all the way through university.
So they're integrating AI and digital literacy right from elementary school.
Right from the beginning. They're not waiting until a worker enters the job market to address the skills pipeline.
All of this really points toward a mandate for lifelong learning. The 4-year degree just isn't sufficient anymore. The knowledge expires too quickly.
And so we're seeing these innovative educational models designed to solve this. Non-degree certificate programs from major universities are booming. And there's this emerging concept of the open loop university.
The open loop university, how does that differ from just, traditional continuing education?
Well, traditional continuing ed is often remedial or elective, right?
Right.
The open loop model integrates education directly into career progression, often with employer sponsorship and micro-credentialing.
So the worker periodically returns.
maybe every 5 or 10 years, for intensive, short-duration knowledge updates. They're designed specifically to recharge their skill set with the latest technology and strategic thinking required by their field. It just it acknowledges that continuous adaptation is the only way to thrive in this new reality.
As we transition into the direct impact on jobs, we have to keep that distinction between automation and augmentation in mind,
We do.
because the evidence across the board suggests a profound and uneven displacement is already accelerating, and it's not hitting where many people originally predicted.
What's fascinating here, and what the research really points to, is that AI's impact is hitting the highest skilled office-based jobs with unprecedented force.
It's not the repetitive physical tasks of the past.
No. Since AI excels at processing information, at automating cognitive and decision-making tasks, advanced economies face an estimated 60% exposure rate across white-collar professions.
So it's not the factory floor workers who are the only, or even the primary group, facing immediate substitution risk.
Not anymore. It's the knowledge worker whose job involves synthesizing data, drafting communications, or analyzing reports.
And that's the shift.
Yeah.
And our dedicated research team compiled corporate anecdotes that are no longer theoretical. They are specific examples of deep organizational restructuring that are already happening.
They are.
Give us a few of the most striking examples from the research.
Okay, let's look at logistics. Amazon, after implementing an AI scheduling and optimization program they called Project Amelia, they reported a 41% reduction in their number of logistics managers.
41%.
Yes. That's a massive cut in a middle management layer because the AI is now optimizing resource allocation and staffing.
That's almost half of that managerial layer gone because of one software deployment.
Now look at customer relations. Salesforce reported cutting its customer service team by 51% after deploying its Einstein Copilot.
And that's an AI tool that handles complex customer queries, right?
It automates service tasks that previously required a human. But the anecdote that really defines the change in the white-collar pipeline that involves finance? JP Morgan reported an 80% reduction in demand for junior analysts after they adopted large model suites for research and document review.
80%.
Think about it. Junior analysts historically spent their first 2 or 3 years doing highly structured, repetitive data collection, spreadsheet management, initial report drafting.
All the tasks that generative AI excels at.
Precisely.
Let's just pause on that. An 80% cut in junior analysts. That's not just an efficiency gain. That's the entire bottom rung of the corporate ladder in finance just disappearing overnight.
That is the profound structural risk. This isn't just about efficiency. It's about the permanent destruction of the traditional training pipeline for an entire generation of white-collar workers.
Because if you can't get that entry-level job to build foundational experience, how do you ever become a senior analyst or a manager later?
You might not. The capital owners get this immense efficiency, but the labor pool loses its entry point.
And this logic of capital, this rapid substitution, it's driving a pace of change that creates this acute vulnerability for one specific demographic, which the data clearly identifies as the canary in the coal mine.
That's the crucial corroborated finding regarding age and experience. The data points to a major vulnerability for the youngest workforce segment, workers aged 22 to 25.
Okay.
In the occupations most exposed to AI automation, this group experienced a statistically significant 6% decline in employment from late 2022 to mid-2025.
A 6% decline for the youngest workers. Yet you contrast that with older, more experienced workers, say those 35 and up.
They saw employment growth in those same high-exposure fields, sometimes ranging from 6% to 9%.
That is a massive divergence in labor market outcome based purely on age and experience level. What's the explanation?
It's the shield of accumulated tacit knowledge. Older, more experienced workers have built up skills that are context-dependent, relational, and highly specialized.
Things like complex internal political navigation or managing client relationships over years.
Or just knowing the undocumented institutional context. All those things are incredibly hard to codify and, therefore, harder to substitute with current AI tools.
But the younger workers, their initial tasks are, by definition, the most structured and routine. The entry-level data processing.
And those are the tasks being automated away first. This is leading to labor market polarization, where AI concentrates wealth among capital owners while displacing low-skill workers and critically eliminating entry points for new professionals.
If new graduates can't get that initial experience, the long-term societal impact on wage distribution is, well, it's frighteningly negative.
It is.
And if this dynamic is playing out domestically, it must have immense global and trade implications too, particularly for developing economies.
That's right. While low-income countries might have a lower direct exposure to AI initially, fewer people working in highly automated cognitive fields, they face mounting indirect risks.
How so?
These risks are transmitted through global competition and supply chain decisions.
Wait, but isn't AI supposed to democratize access? Why couldn't a developing nation just adopt the same AI tools and keep the jobs, maybe even become more competitive?
That's the hope, but the reality is more complex. If firms in advanced economies adopt AI and achieve massive productivity gains, say, they can run their supply chain with 30% fewer managers due to AI, they suddenly have a reduced financial incentive to offshore those tasks to save on labor costs.
So the labor savings from offshoring are diminished compared to the efficiency gains of just adopting AI at home.
Precisely. The research suggests this could lead to reshoring, diminishing the demand for labor in developing economies that rely heavily on manufacturing or service outsourcing.
And that just deepens structural vulnerabilities abroad.
It does. It reminds us of historical episodes where technological change in the developed world led to major economic dislocation in emerging markets.
And we're back to the limits of existing trade law. How do you implement employment protective responses when the job loss is caused by an imported foreign AI service?
It's extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
Policy experts concede that if a country faces a concentrated labor shock due to cross-border AI substitution, expecting that country to just refrain from using trade-related measures is politically unrealistic.
So the consensus is?
The consensus is that multilateral reform is needed not to stop the trade measures, but to channel them, to allow calibrated flexibility, maybe a temporary suspension of commitments, to manage the crisis without tearing the entire trade framework apart.
If you're listening on a podcast service like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment right now to leave us a rating and review for Tomorrow Unveiled. It truly helps us reach new listeners and continue to bring you these in-depth analyses. The shift in labor is one critical story, but it is deeply intertwined with a more philosophical economic phenomenon, the abundance paradox. New technologies, particularly those driven by digital and AI advancements, they promise to end scarcity for many critical industries because the marginal cost of creation and distribution just approaches zero.
This is truly a challenge to the operating system of the entire global economy. Our legal and economic systems, from contract law to property rights to regulatory bodies, they're all fundamentally built on the premise of scarcity.
Right. The whole system relies on the idea that resources, labor, and ideas are limited.
And therefore, their value is derived from that limitation. When technology makes things super abundant, the old rules they start to break down.
We first saw this with information and media, didn't we? When music went digital, people worried piracy would destroy the industry because suddenly replication and distribution were essentially free.
And while there was massive disruption, the music industry found its footing. Once it embraced the abundance model of streaming, that all-you-can-eat subscription, it returned to growth.
Global music revenues hit record highs,
proving that access and utility rather than forced scarcity could still drive profit.
and the sheer volume of creation is staggering. YouTube, for example, receives over 500 hours of new video content uploaded every single minute.
Digitization didn't halt creativity. It democratized it to the point of overwhelming abundance.
What's so fascinating now is that this concept of abundance is extending rapidly beyond intangible information and media and into the realm of physical goods and advanced science.
It is.
So how does physical manufacturing approach abundance?
Through decentralized production technologies like 3D printing, these technologies allow for customized, low-cost, decentralized manufacturing outside of the traditional centralized factories.
And the research highlights some striking examples.
It does. Things like 3D printed cars being created for a total cost of between, say, $18,000 and $30,000. And these cars have features and customization comparable to luxury models that retail for hundreds of thousands of dollars more.
Like a McLaren 650S, which costs over $300,000.
Exactly. The technology is fundamentally decoupling utility and complexity from high cost.
And we see it in synthetic biology, too.
Absolutely. The advent of tools like CRISPR-Cas9 has made complex genetic editing, facile and rapidly achievable. It's democratizing access to science that was once confined to massive, expensive research institutions.
You can now buy simplified DIY gene editing systems with tutorials for as little as $120.
That is the definition of abundance. Complex, powerful technology moving into the hands of the general public at near zero marginal cost.
So the paradox is this. As technologies promise to create this revolutionary abundance, what is the reaction of institutions and entrenched interests that were built on scarcity?
The reaction, predictably, is to try and artificially replicate scarcity. They are desperately trying to fit that square peg of abundance back into the round hole of scarcity economics.
Usually through legal or regulatory friction.
Yes.
And intellectual property, or IP,
Mhm.
law seems like the perfect example of a system designed to manufacture scarcity.
It is the primary tool. Patents and copyrights are explicitly designed to artificially restrict distribution and consumption. An idea, once it's created, is a non-rivalrous public good.
Meaning, my using it doesn't stop you from using it.
Correct. But IP law makes that idea scarce, granting temporary monopoly so the inventor can monetize it through monopoly pricing. As the cost of creation and distribution plummets, the economic necessity of these scarcity mechanisms becomes harder to justify.
Yet they become more fiercely defended.
They do. And the research highlights regulatory friction as another major mechanism for replicating scarcity, using the powerful example of California utility companies and solar power.
This is a perfect illustration. Solar power technology has dropped dramatically in price, making decentralized rooftop energy abundant and cheap for homeowners in places like California.
Mhm.
But the centralized utility companies, whose business model is predicated on being the sole scarcity provider of power,
They responded by trying to impose these steep grid access charges and drastically cutting the rates paid to homeowners for the excess power they fed back into the grid.
so the policy proposal favored the traditional centralized power production model. It effectively gutted the economic incentive for decentralized technology.
It was an effort to use regulation to protect the scarcity profits of the existing players. And this leads us right back to inequality.
Right.
The research is unanimous on this. If policy remains indifferent, this shift to abundance will profoundly deepen income inequality. The immense returns generated by this massive productivity leap will accrue primarily to capital owners,
Those who own the AI models, the algorithms, the network infrastructure.
not to the displaced labor pool. And that leads to massive, unprecedented wealth concentration.
This tension between technological abundance and the resulting societal inequality leads directly to the necessity of policy intervention.
It has to.
Given the speed and scale of the labor displacement we discussed,
Yeah.
we simply cannot afford a passive wait-and-see approach.
No, the consensus among policy experts is crystal clear. A passive approach risks creating long-lasting labor market damage, regional economic decline, and political instability that could make previous transitions look mild by comparison.
The anticipation of disruption alone justifies proactive measures.
Proactive and mitigating policy measures, yes. And for workers who are displaced or need to rapidly transition, robust safety nets are absolutely critical. The government needs to ensure mechanisms are in place for emergency financial support and meaningful pathways to retraining that respect the urgency of the change.
This is why proposals like the suggested AI Horizon Fund, which is designed specifically to fund and scale rapid reskilling initiatives for displaced workers, are gaining traction.
It's a recognition that the capital gains from AI need to be channeled back into protecting and preparing the labor force.
Now, if we look at the immediate legislative landscape within the U.S., the level of activity is intense, particularly at the state level. The federal government may be moving slowly, but the states are not.
Not at all. Our research team found that in the 2025 legislative session, all 50 U.S. states, plus the territories, considered some form of AI legislation,
All 50.
which resulted in the adoption or enactment of about 100 new measures across 38 states. States are rapidly creating guardrails where they see immediate consumer and political harm.
Okay, let's break down the three major focus areas that are consistently prioritized across these state laws, starting with the most visceral one, deepfakes and misinformation.
States are moving very aggressively on election integrity and criminal use. We see enacted laws requiring clear, prominent, and highly visible disclaimers on all AI-generated political advertisements.
The idea being that citizens have to know if a political ad featuring a candidate's voice or image was entirely synthesized.
Right. And beyond politics, the focus is on personal harm, specifically criminalizing the fraudulent or malicious use of deepfakes, like creating non-consensual intimate imagery or using AI to generate material for child sexual abuse.
It's about enforcing provenance, really.
And building public trust in digital media and offering legal recourse against malicious synthetic media.
The second area of focus is government and citizen interaction. As states rush to adopt AI for efficiency, There's a strong push for transparency around automated decision-making.
Yes. State agencies are increasingly mandated to conduct public inventories of all AI systems they use, what the system is, what data it uses, and its intended purpose.
And there's also legislation requiring notification to citizens when they're interacting with generative AI instead of a human.
So if you call a state agency's 311 citizen portal and a chatbot answers, they have to tell you it's an AI.
Exactly. It ensures that transparency is maintained and protects a citizen's fundamental right to interact with a natural person, especially when making decisions about benefits or licensing or legal matters.
It's about accountability in the digital public square.
And finally, the third focus area tackles direct economic and social harms, zeroing in on algorithmic bias in employment and housing protection.
This is perhaps the most immediate policy response to the job displacement risk. States are mandating bias audits and public disclosure requirements for automated employment decision tools, ADDTs, used in hiring and promotion.
The concern being that if an AI system is trained on historically biased data, it will just perpetuate and scale that discrimination.
And disproportionately exclude marginalized groups. So the goal of the mandated bias audit is to test for and mitigate discrimination before the tool is deployed widely.
And we're seeing similar proposals around housing.
Yes, proposals prohibiting the use of algorithms or AI to engage in landlord price fixing or to set residential rental amounts. This is a direct attempt to prevent AI from replicating and optimizing scarcity in the housing market, driving up costs for consumers.
Ultimately, though, successful adoption requires more than just legislation. It requires organizations to fundamentally rethink how humans and machines work together.
That's right.
And the research identified three crucial pillars for maximizing value from AI deployment by focusing on genuine human-AI collaboration.
These pillars move past simply providing training on new software and shift toward redesigning the internal dynamics of work itself. The first is interconnected knowledge.
Explain what that means in practice.
It means breaking down information silos. If a company's knowledge is trapped in thousands of different email threads, scattered documents, and individual employee hard drives, the AI can't access it. It can't learn from it or leverage it.
So organizations need to build a central, accessible source of organizational knowledge.
A unified platform that the AI can use as its primary memory and training ground.
The second pillar is coordination systems. This sounds like using AI to manage the organizational structure itself.
That's precisely right. It means centralizing goals and processes so the AI can act as a massive internal project manager. For a multinational corporation, this means using AI to actively flag duplicative R&D projects across different teams or global plants.
Which frees up human capacity from overlapping redundant tasks.
And focuses human ingenuity on higher margin novel work.
And the third pillar, AI in the team, is perhaps the most critical for changing the mindset.
It is essential. Companies have to actively assign AI a clear, integrated role, almost like a job description on every single project. It can't be just a passive search tool.
So you explicitly task it. Your job is to analyze all the customer feedback and draft the initial summary.
Or your job is to update all progress trackers and flag scheduling conflicts. This makes the AI an indispensable, integrated, and accountable collaborator, ensuring humans don't just default to old, inefficient ways of working. So to synthesize what we've explored on this episode of Tomorrow Unveiled, artificial intelligence is not a technical problem. It is a fundamental institutional and economic challenge. It stresses systems built on 20th century assumptions.
And we see two overwhelming forces at play right now. The clear threat of job polarization, acutely visible in the vulnerability of entry-level workers whose training pathways are being automated away, and the powerful disruptive promise of technological abundance across everything from information to physical goods.
And these forces are demanding urgent responses, forcing governments, trade organizations, and education systems to race to catch up. The old rules, particularly those based on scarcity economics, are breaking down. This demands massive investments in digital skills training and careful, proactive regulatory measures to mitigate bias and manage cross-border labor displacement.
We love hearing your thoughts. Whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, leave a comment and let us know what you think about future-proofing our society in the face of such rapid change.
In closing, I think we have to remember the historical context of technological change. Look back at U.S. agriculture. Through mechanization, biology, and chemistry, we reduced the percentage of the population employed in farming from over 60% a little over a century ago to less than 2% today.
Those technologies created this enormous abundance of food, but also massive labor dislocation.
They did.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. If abundance technologies, AI, 3D printing, synthetic biology, are making information, media, and even complex physical goods easier and cheaper to create than ever before, should society focus less on the historical challenge of production and urgently address the core challenge of distribution?
How do we fundamentally redesign our economic and social systems, our safety nets, our wealth models, our education pathways, to ensure that the widespread prosperity promised by this technological abundance actually reaches the whole population, rather than simply concentrating among the owners of the capital that makes that abundance possible? That is the real regulatory and social question of the next decade.
If you're finding this insightful and you're listening on YouTube, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Tomorrow Unveiled, and consider hitting that new hype button to help us reach more viewers. And of course, be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the future. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time on Tomorrow Unveiled.